Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Metzia daf Nun Chet 58. We are near the bottom of Nun Zayin Mabet, 2 lines from the bottom at the 2 dots. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Before we get started with today's daf, we had yesterday the question as to why it would be prohibited for the treasurer to lend out money on interest for the benefit of the Beit HaMikdash without that constituting the Elon. After all, what is the person trying to do? He's trying to raise money for the Beis Hamikdash. So shouldn't the
Right.
Beis Hamikdash be able to spend money in order to raise money for the Beis Hamikdash? And the simple answer is that I could not find the answer to that question directly. How much are they looking for to raise for the Beis Hamikdash? Well, in order to account, to raise the funds, there was a special head tax essentially that everybody would give half a shekel, basically. I don't know how much that would be worth today, but it's a 50 cents basically is, half of the main coin. The shekel was the main coin, and so half of that everybody would have to give half, and that would be how they would raise the money. But the question was yesterday was, well, maybe we can make it even less, or raise other funds so that we would have additional funds by lending out the money on interest. And the answer, that the best that I could find, is that the Masechah Shkalim, the Mishnayos and the Gemara review the proper uses of those funds. And they talk about building the walls of the Beis Hamikdash and building, and
Right.
hiring laborers, etc. And they don't talk about any kinds of usages that would just result in more money. If it's actually the construction associated with it, then it's fine. But otherwise, it's not. And that's, again, I don't have a perfect answer, and I didn't. There are no psukim that seem to directly touch on this, although we'll come to the discussion of this near the end of Sefer Vayikra. In the last parak of Sefer Vayikra, we talk about the collection of funds, but these are all the funds have been donated lebedek habayit, for the upkeep of the home of the Beit Hamikdash. And so as a result, the best answer that I can have is that what you can do with the bedek habayit funds is only bedek habayit. You can't use it to make more money for bedek habayit, even though you might say, well, that's an indirect, isn't that indirectly for bedek habayit? The answer is that we are going to focus that the means matter, that actually it does make a difference what you do and how you get there. How you get there is as important as where you're going. And so as a result, you cannot simply use funds. And it's clear, of course, from the Gemara's question yesterday that this kind of loan is not permitted because it specifically calls it me'ila. So as a result, it's clear that that's not permitted. And so you put all of it together, what seems to be is that you can only use the funds of bedek habayit in order to engage in the process of construction and maintenance of the Beit HaMikdash itself. You can't use those funds or products for any other purpose. And so as a result, it was very important that, for example, when you had the walls, the stones for the walls of the Beis Hamikdash, that they not be sanctified until they are effectively put in the wall. Because what could somebody do? They could just see a stone hanging around and they could sit on it, and that sitting would provide them with an amount of benefit that's associated with a pruta, and that benefit of a value of a pruta would actually constitute me'ila. So you have to be very careful about it. So that's why we saw yesterday that that the way that we would say that they would engage in the charging of interest was either with those kinds of stones, or it was the indirect interest of when somebody promised to supply the Beit HaMikdash with a supply at a specific price. Even if the price went up, they would have to give the contracted for volume, even though that would effectively look like interest. And if the price went down, they would have to give the benefit of the lower price for the Beis Hamikdash. So the Beis Hamikdash would always win in those transactions. And so that's the kind of interest situation that we were talking about, not with a direct making of money by charging interest on a dollar loan. So I know that that's not totally satisfactory, but that's all I got at the moment. So
The ends don't always justify the means.
exactly, exactly. The ends do not always justify the means. I think to me, that is one of the key lessons throughout much of the Gemara, is that the ends do not justify the means. So Shomer Chinam. So we're now at the last the two lines on Nun Zayin Amabet, and we're talking about our Mishnah mentioned that the laws, some exceptions to the laws of Onah, that there's no Onah when it comes to land, slaves, contracts, and hektish. And we talked about yesterday how that means that if you charge exactly 1/6 more, we'll just stick with Rashi. If you charge exactly 1/6 more, which is the law of Onah, then instead of having it be a valid contract and you give the difference back to the person who got cheated, in that situation, there's no law of Onah. We're going to treat it just like if it was less than a 6. So it's a valid contract and no further money needs to change hands. And the Mishnah also told us that these 4 categories, again, land, slaves, contracts, and hektish, were exceptions to a series of other rules. And one of those rules was the obligation of an unpaid watcher to swear that he was not negligent with respect to watching these items. And so as we pick up on the second line to last line of Nun Zayin Amabet, the Gemara discusses this exception. And the Gemara quotes a Mishnah in Shkolem that suggests that maybe you do need a watcher. An unpaid watcher does need to swear. So let's take a look at that Mishnah, which we learned way back in Masechet Shkolem. So let's give us a chance again to remember some of these rules. So, Uraminu. So again, Shomer Chinam Eino Nishba, and an unpaid watcher doesn't swear if to confirm that in fact there's no negligence. He doesn't need to swear when the item being watched is any of those 4 items that we mentioned: slaves, contracts, land, or hektish. But 1 second, listen to the following, and you'll see that there's a contradiction. If the people of a particular location, if the people of a particular city send their shkalim with a messenger to go to the Beis Hamikdash, the nignavu osha abdu, and then it gets stolen or lost. If so, what would happen to these coins is they would all be put into a special room in the Beit Hamikdash, which is basically their bank, where the Beit Hamikdash's bank account. And then, when necessary, 3 times a year, the treasurers would go in together in a group because they didn't want anybody to be suspect for anything. They would go in together and they would take out what is needed for the holiday that was upcoming, either Pesach, Shavuot, or Sukkot, and then they would and whatever additional funds that would be needed until the next holiday. No, this was just those 3 big holidays, those 3 biggest holidays, not Hanukkah. They didn't. This was even before the holiday of Hanukkah had happened. So, because the holiday of Hanukkah is a much later holiday. But in any event, the point is that they would come in and take those funds out. Now, when they took those funds out, they would specifically have in mind that even the coins that had not yet made it to Yerushalayim would be participating in the gift, because the goal here was that these monies should be aggregated and it should be like everybody is participating in the sacrifices that would be offered on the holidays and during the rest of the year, the communal sacrifices. And so they would specifically have in mind that all the money that is even on its way is participating in these coins that we're taking for the current sacrifices that are needed. So in that situation, if the funds had already been separated, so as a result, they had in mind already that those coins would be belonging to the Beis Hamikdash, then you're going to need to swear to the messengers are going to need to swear to the treasurers. And let's look at Rashi, top Rashi on Nun Chet Amud Aleph, Shelo Pashu. They're going to swear that they were not negligent. that they were not negligent with respect to those coins. Shehein Balei Hadin, and because they are the ones who are namely the treasurers, are the ones who are the losers. They're the ones who are the litigants. The Mekavan Shitarmu, because once they lifted up those coins that were in the special room for the coins at Halishka, Ein Achrayos Aveda al Habalim. So then, once they've done that, those coins are as if they belong to the Beis Hamikdash. And now, if something happens to them, the owners of those coins, the people who made those donations, if the coins get lost, it's not their responsibility to replace them. Ella Allah hektish, but it's hektish that loses. The Amrina Lakaman, as we'll see shortly, Tormin al ha'avud, that we even take the lift up, and we even take those coins on those that have been lost. So that those people would be participating in the collection halalu, this collection. Lemisha shalach shakalo. So those that sent their shekel, v'avad, and it was lost. As long as they didn't already know that it was lost. If you know that it was already lost, well, then you need to make up. You need to make the Beis Hamikdash whole, because it was lost before they picked it up. But if you didn't know that it was lost until after the people in the Beis Hamikdash, the treasurers in the Beis Hamikdash, already took the coins, well, then you're golden. You don't have to replace those coins. And so again, but the point is, and this is the most important point, is that even though those coins are effectively hektish, there's a swearing that needs to happen. The imlav, but if the coins have not yet been picked up in the Beit Hamikdash, nishban livnei ha'ir, then the messengers need to swear to the people who sent them.
So where are the coins now? Are they in the Beit HaMikdash, or are they made hektish before they even get there?
They're made hektish before they even get there. If the treasurers lift up the coins that are going to be used by the Beis Hamikdash to buy the sacrifices for the upcoming holiday. And that's because they.
So where are the coins there?
The coins are in transit.
They're still in transit. They're in a car. They're in a.
Correct. They're on their way to the Beis Hamikdash, because remember, people would send their coins from very far away, and they would send it with the messenger. If they weren't themselves able to go up to the Beit HaMikdash, they would send it. And even maybe if they were going up to the Beit HaMikdash, they don't want to be responsible for all that money. They want to effectively hire somebody or get somebody to do it maybe for free to be responsible for the coins.
But it says they're in the Lishka. Are they already?
There are other coins that are in the Lishka, right? There are coins that are already in the Lishka, and then there are the coins that are on the way. There are two groups of coins, but it's all coins from the same year. And the point is that the people who are the Gizbarim, the treasurers who are lifting up the coins and are going to use them now to buy the sacrifices for the Beis Hamikdash for the upcoming holiday, for the communal sacrifices, they want to have everybody in mind. So they specifically have in mind that they're going to give those coins on behalf of the people whose coins are on their way, because they don't want to leave anybody out. So,
but the coins aren't there yet. They're lifting up coins in the Lishka on coins that aren't even there yet.
That's correct. That's exactly correct. They can have that in mind. They're going to have in mind that all the coins that are on their way, and not only that, but also any coins that are lost that the owners don't yet know about. All of those coins are going to be included, because remember, it's not as if they needed every penny in order to buy the sacrifices. It was a subset of the money that was going to be used for the sacrifices. So let's say they would get $100,000. They have $100,000 in the Lishka. They probably need only $10,000 to $15,000 to buy all the sacrifices. And so as a result, when you have another $10,000 to $15,000 coming in, they would specifically have in mind that not only are we taking on behalf of everybody who put a coin in as part of this $100,000, but another $10,000 to $15,000 that's coming in on its way, we're going to have in mind that those people are also participating in these sacrifices. So that's the idea that they're going to have in mind. Everybody who's on their way, who's intending to have their coins included in the count.
Well, who are the people that don't know about it? If they're donating, they know what they donated, right? You write
You
a check.
know, but remember, so let's say I'm sending you as my messenger. I mean, you're a very diligent person, but for whatever reason, as we'll see shortly, you get, unfortunately, armed robbers come to you and they rob you of the funds that you were bringing for, the city of Riverdale. And so as a result, I'll see you later, guys. And so as a result, now the money has been lost, but the people who are in Riverdale, they don't know that you were robbed yet because remember, they don't have immediate communication. And so as a result, if between the time that you were robbed and when you go back and tell them, listen, I'm really sorry, but I was robbed, the people in the Beit HaMikdash have lifted the coins and had in mind to include all of the coins that are on the way. Well, then the robbery, the victim of that robbery was not the people who live in Riverdale. It was actually the Beis Hamikdash that was the victim of the robbery, because the treasurers of the Beis Hamikdash had in mind those coins, so that the people who are participating will be included in the donation. Now, if on the other hand you did make it back to Riverdale and you told them that, listen, the coins were all stolen, and they were all, I was robbed by armed robbers, well, then you would not be liable because you were going to assume that you're not a paid watcher, and so that's something that an unpaid watcher is not liable for, and the people in Riverdale would have to bring new coins and send them up to the Beis Hamikdash as soon as possible to replace their old coins. So those are the two possible scenarios that we're dealing with.
But they want the people who donated the money. They gave it to a shaliach. They didn't.
Yes,
The
you're the
people,
shliach.
the owners of the coins themselves were not robbed. The shaliach was.
Yes, exactly, 100%. But the owners didn't know about it. What matters is the owner's knowledge. Once the owners learn that their money is no longer going to the Beis Hamikdash, if that happens before the agents pick up the coins in the Beis Hamikdash, well, then they're going to have to replace those coins. But if they only learn about the coins being stolen after the people in the Beis Hamikdash flipped up the coins, well, then it's as if all of those coins that were on their way were already delivered to the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it's the Beis Hamikdash that lost out. And that's why in the first case you're going to need the messenger, the courier is going to need to swear to the treasurers of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay.
What if the owner, if he himself was robbed before he gave it to the shaliach, then he says, I don't have the money. Then they should go after the thief. He says, I'm not responsible for what was stolen.
No. Yes, if the thief comes back, and we'll actually, let's at least finish the Mishnah that we're citing, and because some of the answers to your questions will be answered in the rest of the Mishnah. So let's go through it, and then if you still have questions at the end, we can go through this more over. We go through this again. So the imlav, if the funds have not yet been separated, and again, remember the point is the question is, when do the people learn of the theft? But if the funds have not yet been separated, and when they have to swear. The couriers, the messengers need to swear to the people who are in the city. Because the people of the city are going to need to replace them because they want to be counted as part of the sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash. Yes, it's wonderful to be concerned and say that we need to catch the robber, but in the meantime, we need to make sure that these people get included in the sacrifices of the Beis Hamikdash. And since they learned about the robbery before the coins were taken in the Beis Hamikdash, the robbery was from them and not from the Beis Hamikdash. Nimtzu, if it turns out that they find the coins, maybe if they were just lost, or the thieves return them, elu ve'elu shkalim, all of them are considered holy, meaning the new replacement coins and the original coins. You can't just say, oh, well, these will be for next year. Tough luck, you lost out. I'm very sorry to say that all of the coins go for the Beis Hamikdash and for this year. And of course, as we saw way back in Masechah Shkalim, whatever's left over from this room gets essentially swept out and moved into Bedek Habayit funds. Okay, so now we have this contradiction, because the contradiction is that this Mishnah says there is an oath that needs to be sworn. And so how do we resolve this contradiction? So there are going to be three different answers. Two of them are going to be potential real answers. The middle one will be rejected.
Now you mentioned this as just an aside. You mentioned this is 3 times a year. The Gemara, Mishnah, and Shkalim talks about the collection of Shkalim in Adar prior to Nisan. That's at one time a year when they're making it. They announce
so you're
it.
Confusing two different pieces. One is the moment, the donation. Donation is once a year for Adar.
Right.
And the second is how often do the Gizbarim go into the room to take out the funds? And if you take a look at the last Rashi on Nun Zayin Mabed, it specifically notes the fact that the donations are taken out 3 different times. Okay, and if you go back to the Mishnayos in Masechet Shkalim, which I went through in order to answer the question that we opened today, you'll see that in fact that they went in ahead of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot in order to get funds in order to pay for the sacrifices that would be offered on that particular holiday. So the point is that they would take the money out of the bank 3 times of the year, and that's what I was referring to when I referred to 3 times. But you're absolutely right that when it comes to the donations, that isn't being made. The goal is to make that before the beginning of Nisan each year. Okay, so Amar Shmuel. So how do we resolve this contradiction? Because we said in our Mishnah that there's no oaths, and we just said in the Mishnah in Shkalim that there are oaths. But Hachabenose Sakar Askinan. This Mishnah is talking about people who are paid watchers. And they're swearing in order to get paid their wages. Because the point is that if they are liable, they're not going to. If they would have been liable, then they would not. Then presumably they're not going to get paid their wages. So well, 1 second. Why in the first case are they swearing to the treasurers? Shouldn't they always be swearing to the people in the town, because the townspeople are the ones who are paying them? They need to swear to the people who are in the city. So Amar Rabba says, Nishban Livnei Ha'ir b'ma'amad Gizbarim. No, what the point is that they would swear to the people of the city, but in the first case, where the treasury had already taken coins opposite it, and therefore it's the temple treasury that would actually be losing. So then they would also swear in the presence of the treasurers. In order for the people who are the treasurers not to suspect that they had actually taken the funds. The inami, or another reason why they might have sworn in front of the Beis Hamikdash's treasurers is because they didn't want the people who are the treasurers to call them negligent, because of course they ended up losing the funds, and of course it's the Beis Hamikdash that lost out. So vahan nignavu osha avdu katani. But 1 second. How, if in fact these are paid watchers, so how come they're not liable when you say that they were stolen or lost? The shomer sachar b'gneva ba'aveda chiyuv mechayev. A shomer, a paid watcher, is liable for theft and loss. And all right, you want to point out that our Mishnah notes the fact that when it comes to these 4 items of real property, slaves, contracts, and heftish, that you're not actually liable if you're a shomer sachar. Yeah, they're not going to have to pay, but agrayu miyatz, but they should at least lose their wages for their actions. Shouldn't they be liable in that sense? And so how come they're going to swear in order to get paid? They shouldn't get paid at all. So Amarabba, Nignavu Balista Mizuya. No, when we say Nignavu, we mean that it was stolen by armed robbers, which is considered a sense of ones, of unavoidable loss. Abdu Shetav and Abdu, when we say lost, we don't mean that it was just that they weren't so responsible. Rather, it's Shetav so bayam. It means that their ship sank at sea. And so as a result, that's the loss that we're talking about. So that's answer number one to explain why in one case we do have an oath, in the other case we don't. One case is talking about paid watchers and they're trying to get their wages. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Hamani, Rabbi Shimon Amar Hadshim Shechaya Bachar Yusan Yesh Lanona Vinishban Alayim. No, well, we can just say that the Mishnah over there in Shkalim is actually like Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon says that when people are responsible for a financial replacement of Hektish, well, then it's as if you stole from them. It's as if it was their money and not Hektish's money that you were watching. And so therefore there would be Ona and there would be an obligation to make an oath. So the Mishnah in Shkalim that requires the oath, maybe it's just Rabbi Shimon. But Hatenach Ad Shalo Nisram and Hatruma. Okay, well, that makes sense as long as the treasurers in the Beis Hamikdash have not lifted the money in order to take it out of the room with all the funds that are going to be used for the sacrifices. But once they've taken it out, Mishinitrama Hatruma Kachim She'enu Chai Bachur Yusaninu, then there's no longer a sense of liability for the original owners. So then there shouldn't be any kind of oath. And yet we said that there's an oath that needed to be made to the Gizbarim. The Tanya Torman al Ha'avud, that what would the treasurers do? They would lift up the coins in the Beit HaMikdash, specifically having in mind that they were taking coins on behalf of those coins that were lost. Ba'al Hagavoy, and on those coins that were collected but not yet delivered. Ba'al Asid Legavos. And not only that, but they would also have in mind the coins that were going to be collected in order to ensure that everybody was included in the sacrifices that are bought. So the bottom line is that Rabbi Yochanan's answer doesn't work, because why would the messengers need to swear to the people who were to the Gizbarim? There was no liability associated with that. So as a result, we have to come up with a third answer.
How are you saying here, ala ati ligvot? This is Devar Shelo Ba'olam.
So clearly there's, I understand that. Excellent question. So you're absolutely right to raise it, because it is a Davar Shelo Ba'olam. But the bottom line is that this was, clearly directly permitted, and it's not directly on this business. So the place that we should discuss that is, God willing, when we get back to Masechet Shkalim, we can raise that question on how can you have in mind coins that are not yet collected. But for our purposes, the bottom line is that there was no liability associated with it. So as a result, given that there was no continued liability for the original donors, how come anybody was having to swear associated with it? So therefore, we're rejecting Rabbi Yochanan's answer. So then we offer a third answer. Ella Amar Rabbi Lazar, this oath is actually not a biblical required oath. It's not actually an oath of a watcher. It's a rabbinic oath. Because we don't want people to treat the Beis HaMikdash's property carelessly. So as a result, when we have these unpaid watchers taking the coins up, if something happens, we make sure that they swear. And this could be understood as sort of like okay, so we'll just leave it at that. All right, so now we get to the next piece of our Mishnah, and the next piece of Mishnah notes Sakar Eino Mishalim. We noted this already, right? A paid watcher doesn't even pay for these four items. So Ramile Rav Yosef Bar Chama Rabba. So Rav Yosef asked Rabba, Tanan, what about the following Mishnah? No say Sakar Eino Mishalim. We have in our Mishnah the fact that it says no say Sakar Eino Mishalim. The paid watcher doesn't have to pay if something happens to these things, and in particular when it comes to Hektish or Minu. But what about the following brisa that seems to contradict it? Hasocher es hapoel, when the Beis Hamikdash hires workers, lishmor es hapara, in order to watch the paraduma, so to make sure that it doesn't become disqualified, lishmor es hatina, or to watch the babies, the children that were going to grow up in order to take the water out of the wells in order to make sure that these children were always tahor, lishmor es hazraim, or to watch the grain, either according to Rashi for the Omer offering, or for the Shtei Lechem or Omer offering during the year of Shemitah. In all of those cases, ein nosnin lo schar Shabbos. We're not, if you're paying the person by the day, you don't pay him for his work on Shabbos. Therefore, he's not going to be responsible if any kind of loss happens on Shabbos. All right. Shabbos, chodesh, shana, shavua. But if you hire the person for the week, for the month, for the year, or for the 7-year cycle, nosin lo schar Shabbos. Well, then his wage for Shabbos is included in it, and lefika achrayas Shabbos alav, and therefore he's going to be responsible for anything that happens on Shabbos. But 1 second, all of this that we're talking about is with respect to hektish. So how could there be any liability for hektish? Our Mishnah specifically says that even a paid watcher doesn't have any liability for hektish. So my lav l'shalim, what does it mean that we say that you're going to be there's achrayas? It's l'shalim, you have to pay for it. No, lo lahafsid charo. No, it means that he's not going to have to lose his wages. That, just like we answered again, this is very similar to Shmuel's answer on the last question, where we said that the person was swearing in order to collect their wages. But that doesn't work in this case, because if you want to tell me that he's swearing that he's getting that this is all about being able to get his wages, when we said that there's no responsibility for Shabbos, are you trying to say me that he's going to lose his wages? He doesn't have any wages on Shabbos to lose. We already said that he's not getting paid for Shabbos. So that can't be. So ishtik. So as a result, Rabbah was quiet. He had no answer to how do we explain this inconsistency between the fact that there seems to be liability in the Mishnah, in this brisa that we quoted, and there's no liability according to our Mishnah. So Amrlay, so he then said to Rabbi Yosef, who asked the question, did you hear anything about this? Amrlay, and he said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Sheshes. This is what Rav Sheshes taught. That where we specifically acquired from the worker a commitment to pay for any kind of losses. And so as a result, that's the situation. So it's a special category that ordinarily there is no liability associated with a paid watcher watching hektish. But in this case, we make him commit that and through an act of kinyan that he's going to be liable for such a situation. And similarly, we have a statement of Rabbi Yochanan, where you actually make an acquisition from the witness, from the worker, and so as a result, that's why we say in that brisa that there is going to be liability. So when we say liability, we mean actual liability. Okay, so now we come to
what was the kinyan here?
So the kinyan would be a special kinyan that would be made just in connection with the fact that, so let's say I'm going to be the one who's watching the para aduma to make sure that it doesn't do work. So the Beis Hamikdash would say, okay, so here do a kinyan. Usually it would be a kinyan suit. There's some kind of chalipin kinyan where I lift up either a handkerchief or a pen or whatever that in order to indicate that I am taking on the responsibility and the liability associated with any kind of thing that happens. So even though, according to our Mishnah here in Mesechus Bava Metzia, there's no liability, I have the ability to do a kinyan and take on a liability that wouldn't exist otherwise. And that's
so the kinyan is it's not a kinyan of an object, it's a kinyan responsibility.
Exactly. It's the same kind of kinyan that we make in connection with a marriage. That when we do a marriage, we have the groom lift something up in order to take on the responsibilities that are in the ketubah, and as a result of that in kinyan, he's now subject to the liabilities that are in the ketubah. So similarly here, the watcher is lifting up the item and now taking on the responsibility for anything that were to happen to any of the items that are being watched. Rabbi Shimon said, and this is a quote from our Mishnah, we just quoted Rabbi Shimon because we were thinking, according to Rabbi Yochanan a few moments ago, that maybe that Mishnah over there in Shkolim could be according to Rabbi Shimon. But there again, we quoted Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon was in our Mishnah that when you consecrate something, where if there's liability that's associated with it, namely, if I were to say that I am committing to bring a sacrifice, and now something happens to that sacrifice, and you were watching that sacrifice for me, well, then there would be liability because I'm going to have to replace it. On the other hand, if I say that this animal is going to be my sacrifice, well, then if you were watching it, and now something happens, you would not have any kind of liability because I don't have to replace it because I only said that this animal was going to be the sacrifice. I didn't bring the liability of bringing the sacrifice on me personally. So Tani Kamei de Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abba. So the Tana taught the following brisa in the front of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abba. That if when there's an obligation to replace something, so then the watcher is going to be obligated, and the context in this brisa is to bring a korban asham if there was theft, if he took it and he swore falsely associated with it. So shani korah behen b'Hashem v'chikesh. Well, that's because the pasuk specifically says b'Hashem v'chikesh. This is the pasuk by Yikra Parakeh pasuk Kaf Aleph. Nefesh kisechata uma'ala ma'al b'Hashem. And if somebody does some kind of me'ilah from Hashem, so v'chichesh and denies it ba'amito among his people, the pikadon or b'sumas yad, or begezel, or ashak esamito. So then he's going to have to bring this korban asham. So, but the point is that even though the context is actually that you're stealing from some other person, because of the juxtaposition, there's an esnachta, I believe, under the Bahashem, but we're going to connect the two words that are next to each other, Bahashem v'chikesh. We're going to say that as a result, if there's liability, you're going to need to bring an asham. And okay,
and whom does the liability fall on the shaliach and the?
No, we were talking about the liability for the person who consecrated the item. If there's liability to replace the item, so again, we're talking about a situation where the person says that they commit themselves to bring a sacrifice. So as a result, if their original sacrifice dies or something happens to it, they have to bring another animal. So that's the situation that we're talking about. So where that's being watched, we're going to say that there's going to be liability if now the watcher turns out to have been a thief and steals it and swears falsely about it. So in that situation, we're going to say that there's going to be an asham that's offered, even though ordinarily there's no liability associated with the watcher for hektish, as we saw in our Mishnah. In this situation, he's going to have to bring a korban asham. But
so the shomer has to bring
the shomer who steals. The shomer who steals.
He has to bring the asham.
Yes, because he stole and he swore falsely. That's what the pasuk in Vayikra is talking about.
That doesn't matter. So that has to be. It does. But he has to be a shomer sacher, right?
No, any kind of shomer. If he steals and swears falsely about it.
Oh, right. Okay.
But if if you were the one who gave me the animal to watch, and I stole it, but you only donated this animal to the Beis Hamikdash, and now I stole it and swore falsely about it, then I would not be liable for a korban asham because you committed this animal and no other animal. You only said that this animal is going to be your sacrifice. You didn't make in liability for yourself. So you're not responsible for trying to replace it. So in that situation, Shani Koreba had Ba'amito B'chikesh, because the Torah says that it's only for the people, not for it's only against. Although this is the really the pasuk says it's the order is reversed in the pasuk. But in any event, the bottom line is that the juxtaposition of falsely denying has to be against your fellow. Now, Amar Lay, I sort of explain this brisa as we will eventually explain. But the Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Abba says to him, Klape Laya, you seem to have things mixed up here because the order seems to make no sense. Because the opposite order makes sense, right? Why are you going to be instead of referencing the Shani Koreh Behen B'Hashem B'Chichesh in the first part, that should be the situation where we cite Ba'amito B'Chichesh, because there's Achrayus, the other person is going to be liable. So you're actually harming your fellow. Whereas in the second case, where we say that you're putter, that's where we should cite B'Hashem B'Chichesh, because that you're putter because you're not stealing against your fellow. So it doesn't make any sense what you're saying. So the opposite makes much more sense. So Amrulay Ismaye, should I delete it? Should I erase it? So Amrulay, no, don't. Hakikamer, this is what it's going to be saying. Kadshim Shechayab Achriyus Chayab. That why are you liable for the asham when if you swear falsely when the person who offered the sacrifice is going to be liable for it? It's because because there's an addition, an expansion of the liability of an asham for a situation of Hashem b'chichesh. That when it's against Hashem, even though this animal is actually hektish, because there is also liability, we're going to say that that case also gets included. But when there's no liability for the person who gave the animal, the owner of the animal, to replace it, well then patur, then the watcher is going to be exempt because because the nature of the kichesh, the nature of the denying needs to have an aspect of denying to your fellow, and in this case there is no denying to the fellow because the fellow doesn't have any liability associated with this animal anymore. This animal is the one that's hektish, and no other animal would need to be replaced. Okay, so now we get to the final piece of our Mishnah. And the final piece of our Mishnah was that the Rabbi Yehuda said that a Torah, a jewel, an animal, they're also not subject to anah. And now the Gemara is going to cite a related brisa. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af HaMocher Sefer Torah Margalis Uvehema Ein Lahen Onah. That those things don't have onah associated. There's no penalty for charging a higher price, and there's no at least if you charge a 6, it won't be considered onah. So Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda said we have a brisa, Av HaMocher Sefer Torah Ein Lo, not only with respect to real estate, but also when it comes to a Torah. Lefisha Ein Kates L'Damah, because there's no limit to the value. Behema Umargalis Ein Lehem Onah, and when it comes to an animal and a jewel, then you're not going to have a pearl. You're also not going to have a price fraud, because the point is that often you need to match what you already have. You don't want to have a big animal plowing with a small animal. You don't want to have a big pearl match with a small pearl. And so Amrulo, so as a result, but then the sages said back to Rabbi Yehuda, everything. Why are you focusing just on jewels and animals? So Rabbi Yehuda, what would Rabbi Yehuda say back? So that's the end of the brisa. But now we have the Gemara saying, well, how would Rabbi Yehuda answer this question, which seems to be a decent question that the Chachamim would say to him? So these are more important. Other kinds of things are not as important. So as a result, they won't be subject. They would still remain subject to price fraud. And again, this highlights that on some level, the whole concept of onah is based on what are people's expectations. Va'ad kama. So, all right, you're going to tell me there's no onah, but there's got to be some limit to how much we can do. So Amar Amemar ad kadei demehem until their full value, meaning that you would be able to pay, you would be or charge up to twice the amount. And so as a result, either you charge up to twice the amount or you charge half the amount. In both those situations, then that would be a case where we would say, hey, that's ona. So Tanya, and we have a brisa, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, adding some additional items. That also when you sell a horse, a sword, or a shield during war, meaning if you're in the middle of battle and you need these items to help with the war effort, those also are not going to be subject to ona, because again, those are things that are necessary for life. Okay, so that concludes our discussion of monetary ona, and now we transfer and we change over to a discussion of ona beyond the business context. So the same to ona b'memkar, just as there's ona when it comes to business, kach ona b'dvarm. There can also be ona with words. And so what's the context? So let's take a look. We're going to get some examples in our Mishnah. Lo yomer lo, b'kama chayfetzeh, v'hu eno rotza likach. You're not supposed to say to somebody, how much does this item cost if you don't have any intention to buy it? And similar, so again, because you're gonna give the person make the person optimistic, think that they're going to get something, and now they're going to not get anything. And if the person had done tshuva and had done sins, but now is doing better, lo yomer lo zechor ma'asech harishon. Remember what you used to do? That's also not good. Imhu ben gerim, and if the person was a children of, a descendant of people of converts, lo yomer lo zechor ma'asecha avosecha. Remember your father's, your parents' actions, your ancestors' actions. Shenemar v'ger lo tonu lo tilchatzanu. And you should not, when it comes to a convert, you should not wrong or oppress them. And so, and Tosfos points out, imhu ben gerim, hainu zu afzu, that this is in the Mishnah is being taught in one thing building on the next. So in the first case, there's a person thought that they were going to gain and they ended up losing, and they're not going to get the gain. Not only that, but even if there's no possible gain associated with it, it's just about them abusing them and their own psyche. So that also is going to be problematic. And not only that, but even if the afilu mas avosab ain lo lahaskir, that even if you're not focusing on the person himself's own improper actions, but rather just the improper actions of his ancestors, that's also going to be a problem. So that's what Tosfos highlights again, second Tosfos on the Chedam. So Tanaraban, the Gemara now highlights a very long brisa that provides a basis for this prohibition, and then gives some additional examples. So Tanaraban, lo sanu ishes amito. So again, the Torah tells us that you should not. This is in a couple of weeks from now, so it's almost a Daf Yomi coincidence. That you should at the end in Parshas Bahar, I believe, that you should not wrong your fellow. And it must be that this pasuk is talking about using words to harm somebody. How do I know that it's not dealing with money? Because it says 3 psukim earlier, because we have the same low tonu, the same kind of language 3 psukim earlier when it says that al tonu ish es achiv. You should not again wrong your fellow. So again, that hari onas mamon amr, that's clearly with respect to buying it to business, because it specifically says selling and buying. Hama ani mekayim lo tonu ish es amito. So how do I explain the pasuk that's 3 psukim later in pasuk Yud Zayin? So must be vonas dvarim in talking about words. Okay, so give me some examples. If somebody was a repentant, Al Yomar Lo, don't say to him, Zakor Ma'asech HaRishon, remember what you used to do? Im Haya Ben Gerim, if he's children of converts, Al Yomar Lo, Zakor Ma'aseh Avasecha, remember what your parents used to do? Im Haya Ger Uva Lilmo Torah, and if he's a convert and he's coming to study Torah, Al Yomar Lo, Pesha Akal Nevelos Utrefos Shkatzim Urimasim, that this your mouth, which ate these disgusting things, Torah, you're going to come learn Torah from that came out of God's mouth. That's ridiculous. Again, very abusive language that we would never want to use. And then not only that, but if something bad happens to somebody, or there's some kind of disease, some kind of sickness, Shahaya Mekaber has been up, or God forbid he's burying his children. Yomar Lo, so Al Yomar Lo, don't say the things that Eov's quote unquote friends told him. That what do they tell him? That your fear that your fear of Hashem should give you confidence and hope. The tom derachecha zafar na mi hu naki abad. Because listen, look at the integrity of your ways. Because of course Hashem is clean and does not cause the destruction of anybody who is innocent. So again, that's a terrible thing. You're basically telling the person, look at what you did, and because it's you need to check out your actions. And if now one more, and this is going to be the financial one. If donkey drivers, now again, here again we can highlight that in this last one, your intentions could be wonderful. Your intentions could be very pure. You're trying to encourage the person to do right and to examine their actions and see whether or not they should be doing tshuva. And maybe that's why all these bad things happen to the person. But the answer is that that's not your job. That's not your job to do that. And you should not, and we don't think that Eov's friends were good friends. Rather, you should provide consolation and assistance to somebody who's suffering. And now even more so. So that again highlighting now, if somebody's looking for a job, they want to looking for some, if you got somebody who's a donkey driver and he's looking for grain to carry, lo yomar lahem l'chu eitz ploni shehu mocher tuo. Go to tell somebody that this person sells grain and maybe he'll have a job for him. But yodea bo shalom macher ma'olam, and he knows that he never sold grain ever, because again you're sending a person on a wild goose chase. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer av lo yitla einav al hamekach. And you shouldn't look at something, you shouldn't even check out merchandise when you don't have money to buy it, because again you're going to give hope to those who are selling the merchandise that maybe you're going to buy it. All of this, now all of this on some level it relates to your intention, because and the whole davar hamasur lalev, and anything that depends on a person's intention. It says in that context, Hashem, you should fear your God, because the bottom line is that even if no one else knows your intention, you might say, "Oh, I have the most pure intentions," but Hashem knows your intentions. Hashem knows whether or not you're trying to actually abuse somebody. So even though maybe you shouldn't do this, no matter what your intention is when it comes to telling somebody like Eov's friend sent to him, Hashem is going to punish you for actual engaging in abuse if your intention was abuse, even though you might say that you had purest of intentions. And again, similarly with sending a person to somebody who never sold grain, Hashem knows that that the person never sold grain and that is unlikely to be able to provide a job. But if you're just trying to push somebody off to go look for somebody else, that's going that is afflicting somebody with your words and is not appropriate and is going to be punished by Hashem. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Gadol Onas Dvarim Onas Mamon. That actually wronging somebody with your words is actually worse than wronging monetarily. Because when it comes, again, this is a Parakavav, Parakavav Hey, plus Yud Zayin, because when it comes to verbal abuse, the Torah says that you should fear God. But it does not say via when it came to the monetary abuse. Rabbi Elazar Omer, the second reason why verbal abuse is worse than monetary abuse. One is on your body, one is against your body, not against your, and the other one is just against your money. Now, Tosfos points out here, we take a look at the fourth Tosfos on the Mechedam Abet, Zeb Begufo, Zeb Mono, Baham, the Amrinam Perikagoza Basra that we saw at the end of Baba Kama, Hagoza Lechavera, that if you steal from Shava Pruta, that if you steal even a one Pruta from your friend, Ki'ilu Gazon Neshamato, it's as if you stole his soul. Meaning you could have, it's almost like you killed the person. Whoa, now that would seem to suggest that even stealing money can be like afflicting the person's body. Well, Rav Kaved, but that's because sometimes there will be a very severe drought where there's a lot of starvation. And now, as a result of your stealing even that one pruta, the person won't have any money to buy anything. But there are lots of people who don't have that kind of loss. So yes, technically, stealing somebody's money could be equal to afflicting their self, but it isn't usually. So that's reason number two to think that verbal wronging is worse. Verbal abuse is worse. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Zenitin Lahishavon V'zel Lonitin Lahishavon. The bottom line is that when it comes to a monetary wrong, you can make it right. You can pay the person the money that you took from him. But when you're doing a verbal kind of abuse, there's no possibility of restitution. And so, as a result, that is the discussion of verbal abuse, and we're going to have more examples of that. And now we're going to be talking about the prohibition of embarrassing somebody. And then we're going to get to probably one of the most famous discussions in all of Shas, the case of Taner Shalachnai. All of that is on tomorrow's daf. So please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom. I believe that tomorrow's daf will be taught after Shabbos on Zoom. So keep an eye out for the precise time. I can't remember whether it's 45 or an hour after Shabbos is over. Wishing everybody a good Moed and a Shabbat Shalom.